Today we're going to learn how to build real-time threat detectors using infrastructure as code. In our last lab, we built a time series threat detector in Amazon using Athena and Lambda functions, and this was based on our CloudTrail logs. Now, when it comes to threat detection, logs are about as foundational as it gets. I mean, back in the old days, it's pretty much all we had, and heck, that's how some organizations still operate today. But cloud's awesome, and aside from logs, we have real-time events. And if you remember, I originally explained those using like a Star Wars Lego, and I know weird things happen. Now, so far, we've worked with two types of events. Those coming from our tools like Security Hub, and those generated by AWS services themselves, which we've captured using CloudTrail. And we did that in our S3 Auto Remediation Lab. Today, we're going to build on those skills and create a new pipeline for CloudTrail event-based threat detectors. But to add a twist, I'm going to walk you through the entire process of creating and deploying your own CloudFormation template. Yeah, you can skip to the end and how I actually build this out, but that's cheating and cheaters never win, outside of politics, business, sports, and pretty much everything else. Here's the setup for how we're going to do things today. We'll be building the simplest kind of an event-based threat detector, one that triggers off a single API call. And as powerful as these are, they're also the most prone to being a pain in the ass. Why? Because we're triggering on activity that might be authorized without any nuance or checking to understand the context. In other words, they can be really noisy because anytime that API triggers, we're going to get an alert. They're not false positives because they do alert exactly on what we asked Amazon to alert on, but they can still alert on activity that might otherwise be authorized. So today I picked an event that I always want to know about, the creation of a new IAM user. Now, for some of you at work, this could be super noisy, but I do know of real large enterprises that have actually locked down creating IAM users and don't allow it, especially not without an exemption. And if you do get it, you're probably going to want to know that that actually occurred. And to make this lab more interesting, we're going to deploy our threat detector in all of our accounts, but we're going to set those send those alerts to our security audit account, and then that's going to send us an email using our existing SNS topic, simple notification topic that we set up. All right, let's straighten this all out with a nice little user story. As a security administrator, I want a real-time alert every time someone creates an IAM user in any of my accounts. And I want these alerts to come from my existing notification topic that I built in my security audit account. Nice and simple. So now, to translate that user story, it means we've got to do a few things in terms of implementation. The first is we have to set things up so we can capture the IAM create user event in every one of our accounts. Then we have to send those events to our centralized security audit account. Then we have to create a trigger so that when that alert comes in, it goes to our simple notification service topic. Now, this is different than how we set up our alerting for Security Hub back a bunch of labs ago, because that service was already centralized. In other words, it created events in one place for everything that occurred in all of our accounts. But in this case, we have to build our own centralization because you can't actually create a CloudWatch or an EventBridge event off of a CloudTrail event. Got to use my words. You can tell it's near the end of the day. So here's how it works. If you remember with CloudTrail, the events are only created in the account in the region where that API call is made. And we have no real centralization for that. CloudTrail centralizes all the logs, but it doesn't centralize the events. And so that's why we're going to have to go ahead and build this ourselves. Now, to be clear, the objective of this lab is to only teach the foundational techniques for capturing events across all of these accounts and centralizing them. In future labs, we'll build in more intelligence by routing to Lambda, like we did in the last lab, instead of directly forwarding all events. Because as you might imagine, in some of these, we might want to do a little more analysis of them before we actually ring the alarm bells. Now, to pull this lab off, we're going to do it using two CloudFormation templates. One is going to set up our security audit account with a new event bus to receive these events from all of our other distributed accounts, and then forward those to our existing SNS topic that we created a while ago in that particular account. Then we're going to create another CloudTrail template that we deploy with stack sets, which means it's going to push into all of our accounts so that when the IAM create user event happens, it sends that information centrally so we can actually alert on it and see what's going on. And instead of hosting the template for you, where you just deploy templates that come out of my environment, this time you're going to build it yourself and you're going to host it in your own S3 bucket. So to start, what we're going to do is, if you go into the blog post, I've got all of the pieces that we're going to go ahead and copy and paste to get into this. And you need to open up a text editor. So we're going to build those locally. And the text editor that I'm going to be using, it's called Sublime Text. It's available for all of the major operating systems. I do really recommend using a text editor that's meant for coding and scripting. Don't do this with Microsoft Word. You're going to cause yourself a word of pain. So I have Sublime Text opened up on my account on my computer, and I'm going to start pulling out the pieces from the blog post, the little text snippets that I gave you, and I'm going to explain those as we go along. The first thing I've pasted in is just kind of like the standard header for these CloudFormation templates. You have to have the format version, which is, has not been updated since 2010, and a nice description so that we actually know what we're working with. Now, let's start getting the meat of this, and I'm going to add some spaces in. You'll notice I'm being very careful with my spacing because these are YAML files. And if you're worried about this, you can just copy and paste the last version that I have over on the blog instead of the piece by piece, but I'm going to show you piece by piece. The first section we put in is parameters. And so parameters are basically those variables we collect when you go to deploy the template. If you're doing this via command line, you actually have to paste these in into the command line. It's not like interactive. And you've seen us do this in the web where I've had you paste in things like your organization ID. Now, to make this easier to read, I'm going to click down here. My editor's got a little thing to show nice pretty colors when we use YAML. So we've got two that we're going to have. We're going to have our organization ID because we need this to create the policy that allows any account or organization to send events to the event bus we're about to create. And then we have an SNS topic already. So we want to pull the ARN of that SNS topic. And I'm going to make my life easier. And you know what? Your lives will be easier when you actually go ahead and do this. And you'll just need to swap in the account ID because we're all been using the same name. But that tells it where to go to. These are variables that will work in the rest of the CloudFormation template. The next bit I pasted in is the big resources block. So these are variables, parameters that we're going to use in other places. And then there's the resources themselves, which is the things that we want to build. And the way I like to describe these is each of these is kind of basically, you can think of it as an object. So it starts off, we're creating an object. And in this case, we're calling that object security monitoring bus. And then what is it? Well, it's an EventBridge event bus. Because, events is the name of the EventBridge service, and it has a name called security monitoring. Pretty easy. Then the next thing we're creating is a policy. It's called allow org put events. How do I know it's a policy? It says it right there. It's an event bus policy. Now this is the magic line, and this is a really good place to look at it because we have it in two places. That exclamation mark REF means reference. So this is referring to security event monitoring bus, which is this piece here. And so the event bus name that we're creating this policy for is the event bus that we just created. Here's how CloudFormation works. CloudFormation, you tell it everything you want to build, and you can refer from one object to another object. For example, you could say, give it everything it needs to create an instance, but if you want to attach a security group to that instance, you don't know the instance ID because the instance ID doesn't exist. I mean, in my example here, we've got a name. We hard-coded that name. That's easy. But in a lot of cases, you don't actually know what you're referring to until Amazon goes to build it and they give you that instance ID or whatever that ID is back. CloudFormation is smart enough to go, hey, tell me all the things to build. I'm going to build them in order. And I know that, oh, I have to build that instance first, then I have to get that ID, and then I can now refer to that ID in other sections. So that's what that ref does. Now, the other thing that ref does is we can actually refer to this object. Well, what's the organization ID? We're right up here. You see, it even put a little box around it as I clicked on it. That's one of the cool things about these kinds of text editors. And that's a parameter. So I'm referring back to the parameter. So when I go to run it, I'm going to give it my organization ID and that SNS topic. And when it goes to actually create the condition that it only allows access from within this organization, it knows to pull that organization ID. It's just variable substitution pieces. Now I'm going to back up and I'm going to add more resources. So I want to make sure I'm lined up with the previous resources because with the YAML indentation matters. And the last part I'm building is my sending all of the events to that simple notification service topic. So it's an event rules and the properties. It gives it a name, a description. And again, we now are using our other parameter. We're referring back to it. And you'll notice here that in the target, it's pulling the events from the event bus. So this is the event bus rule. And then it's also referring to the SNS topic. Got that a little out of order. So pretty straightforward. And this is a nice and complete CloudFormation template. Have our header information, our parameters that we're going to use later, and then we build out our resources, and we can refer to other resources that are being built, and CloudFormation is smart enough to build them in the right order, or we can refer to our existing parameters. Now we want to save this file locally, and I'm going to pause as I save just because I don't want to be, you guys know when you pull up the file dialogues, it shows you all the files on my system, and well, that might be embarrassing. And I named this security audit event collector.template. As a rule, I like to name my CloudFormation templates with template at the end, not text files, not YAML, anything else, but any of those file extensions would work. All right, with that out of the way, let's create our second one. And there's another neat little trick that we have in here. So let me go grab that from the blog post. Now this one I pasted in as one big blob, and it's okay for you to do that, but I'm still going to walk through and point out a few things. So let's get the YAML showing. So the first template here, this is what we're going to do to create the central event bus. This is the one we're going to use to create the rules that run in all of our accounts and send to that event bus. Now there's a trick here we're using, which is conditions. One of the things is to create this EventBridge rule that's going to forward all the events centrally. I want to run this in all regions that I'm using. And in our case, it's US West 2 and US East 1. The problem is if I'm creating a role and I try to create it in both regions, as you know, IAM is a global service. It only exists in US East 1, and you can actually get errors because it's going to, by instinct, try to create the role a second time or the policy a second time. And I actually did that the first time I was practicing with this lab, and it broke everything. So what we're doing is we're now using another feature of CloudFormation. So we have a condition. So the condition is US East 1. So basically, the condition name is US East 1. That's the object. And is it the region US East 1? Then when I go to create the resource, when I go to create the role, it will only create the role if it's creating it in US East 1. If this template is running in another region, it's not going to try to create the role. And so that gets us around that little error message. So we create the role that allows us to send to our central event bus. Then we create the EventBridge rule itself. And this is another little piece of magic down here. We have the event pattern. So we're creating a new rule. And the event pattern here is if the source service is IAM and it's an API call, which we get via CloudTrail, that's where that detail type piece comes into play. And I know it's really weird they make you do it this way, but it is anytime you're capturing API calls from any of the services, you've got to use that magic line of that detail type. Then we have the event source. Now, why do we have the event source and the source? Technically, you only need one of these. But the nice thing about this is anything in the detail, like you can make your own events, publish them to EventBridge, and you can make the detail be whatever you want. So somebody could spoof an event by just saying in the detail, event source is IAM. Well, now it's only going to work if the source and the event source both say it's coming from the IAM service. So it just adds a little bit of resiliency to things. and then the event name, and this is it. This is the API call we care about, create user. And whenever we see that event, then we're going to send it out to that target, which is going to be, it's going to tell it to use this US East role, and it's going to send it to our target ARN, which is the one we created here. And you'll notice that target ARN is a parameter. Because we're building this in a separate account is this one, we're not going to actually know what that is. We have no way to refer to it. So we actually set that up as a parameter as well, and you can paste that in. Okay, that's a lot. Let's go ahead and save this one out. And I called it threat detectors.template, and these are in the blog post so you can copy and paste. We now have our two templates, our central one to create our event bus that we can send our messages to and forward those on to SNS, and then an event forwarder we deploy in every account that's going to push these events into our central account that's located in US East 1. Now we've got to do a couple of things to make all of this work. The first thing we need to do is create our S3 bucket. We're going to host this actually in our security operations account. That's the same one where we're able to run stack sets out of. So it kind of makes sense. And these are CloudFormation templates that only security operations will work with. So let's go to security operations with our admin, and we're going to go to S3. And we need to create a bucket. Now we're going to need our organization ID, and an easy way to do this is just, click this one, open up a new tab, and go to organizations. And our organization ID is right here. So I'm going to take that and we'll add this to, let's create a new file here where we've got the some of the things that we're going to need to actually tie this all together so we can copy and paste. Okay, so I have my organization's ID, and now I'm back into S3. And let's call this CloudSLA templates and paste our org ID at the end. This will be unique for your organization, but if you're worried about it, you can also add some random characters at the end. Nobody else will have this because remember, S3 buckets need to be globally unique names. And nobody's going to be able to see anything here because we have our block public access turned on. This will only be accessible within our account, and we'll create bucket. Now, the next thing is we do want to make this accessible from all of those other accounts where we might be running these templates out of. So we click on the bucket. We go to permissions, scroll down, and we'll go to edit bucket policy. There's no bucket policy right now. And if you go over to the blog post, I have a template for you. I pasted in the template, and there's a couple of substitutions we need to make. The first is we do need the organization ID. So we'll highlight that and pull that from our little cheat sheet here. Paste that in, that's good. The next we need is the bucket ARN itself. And so we copy that and we can paste our bucket ARN here. Now you'll notice, I'll zoom in, it's really important. We need that /*. Why? This allows anybody within our organization to get objects outside of this, or get objects from this bucket to read the objects. So that's what getObject is. They can read the templates that we're storing here. But what's interesting is they can't list and look at what's inside of the bucket. All they can do is grab those objects, and only if they know the name. With that set, we will go ahead and click Save Changes. And so that bucket policy is in place. It can't ever be public. And even within our own organization, they're only going to be able to get those objects. They're not going to be able to do anything else. Well, we need to upload our two templates so we have them here. So let's go to Objects, and then we click Upload. And then we're going to click Add Files. Now, as soon as I do this, the file browser is coming up, and it'll look different on your system than mine. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to load those files, and then I'm going to click Upload. And you'll see what that looks like in a sec. So I clicked on for both of those files, and I hit upload. And now both of those templates are stored up in S3. It just worked that fast, but hey, I've got good internet. Now we need to get out of this account and we have to deploy or create that event hub first, that event hub first, because all of our other templates are going to refer to it. And if it doesn't exist, they'll error out. We want to create that event hub in security audit. And oops, I made one mistake here. I'll go back into security operations. And you'll know what kind of a mood I'm in if I went ahead and edited this before I put it in. Okay, so we've got our two objects here. I need to get the URL for each of those objects. So let's grab this URL first. If I click on it, we have it right there, object URL. And I want to push that object URL over here so I have access to it. And then we go back to our objects, click on the next one, grab the next template's URL, and we'll switch over and paste that there. So those are both the ones that we're going to need as we go further in the lab. Now I close this and I go to security audit. And we'll go straight to CloudFormation. We'll go ahead and create a stack. So create a stack with new resources. And in this case, the Amazon S3 URL will be yours. The one we're going to use is the security audit event collector. So your URL will obviously be different than mine. And I'll paste that in and go to next. And for the stack name, we'll call it security event collector. We'll paste in our organization ID. And for the SNS topic, there's a little bit of a cheat here. And we don't need to actually go look it up because if I go into, so I'll take this pattern. Whoops. Should have said US West 2. Thought I'd change that. It will be changed by the time you do the lab. We just need this ARN because that is a valid looking ARN other than the account ID is wrong. And I'll paste that in. Then I'm grabbing my account ID from up here. So we'll copy that account ID and we'll swap it in there. So it looks like that. And click next. Scroll down. Click next. Scroll down. Wait a minute. It didn't ask me for one thing. Let me check something. Nope, that was good. I got a little wrapped up in my head over which template we were in and click submit. And I'll pause as this goes and deploys. That one deployed pretty quickly. We are going to need to get the ARN of our EventBridge that we just created. And I'll go here and to Amazon EventBridge. And if I go to event buses, we now have our new event bus. I'm going to copy that event bus and we'll put that over here where we will need it. And the next thing we're going to do is we're now all set up. So we're going to close out of this account and we're going to go back to security operations because this is where we have permissions to deploy our stack set. So go to CloudFormation. And if you remember clicking on the side, we need to go to stack sets. Once it pops up, we need to go to service managed stack sets. And there will be 3 in here already. We'll create our stack set and we're going to keep with the service managed permissions. That's the easiest way to do it. We need the URL for our template, which again is hosted in our own account. And it's the second template here. We'll copy the template and we'll paste it. We're going to give it a name. We'll call it threat detectors. And for the parameters, we need that event bus ARN, which is here. And that's our centralized event bus. We are creating a new IAM role to make all of this work, if you remember, as we went through that. So check that next, and we're going to deploy it to our entire organization, being a threat detector. But the regions we want are only Oregon and Virginia. So Virginia and Oregon, because remember, all of our other regions are locked out with the service control policy. Now, to make it go a little bit faster, I can't remember how many accounts we have. Let's just say 10 concurrent accounts, and you can fail up to 9. It's weird. These two have to be aligned like that, if you remember. And we'll do all regions in parallel. This just speeds everything up, including failure. If it fails, hopefully it doesn't fail, and submit. Okay, it took that stack set, and I will pause as this runs. Well, that went a lot faster than the time I was testing it and I didn't do everything in parallel. And now everything is deployed. Let's close this out, and that's it. Everything's deployed the way you want. Now, if you want to put this to the test, you can go into any of your accounts. Let's go into, for example, test account 1, go in with administrator access, and create an IAM user. Now, if you do that, don't give the IAM user any permissions. You don't want to be creating a security flaw. It doesn't actually need to have any permissions. Just the IAM create user event itself should trigger everything. But we've done a few new skills today. One, we got more in depth on what infrastructure as code looks like. We talked about how to refer to the different objects. And objects is my word. Maybe that's not the right one to use, but I think it works well to explain it. How to set parameters. And then we deployed both an individual CloudFormation template and then the stack set. The individual one creates our central event bus and set things up so that anybody could send events to it. And then all of our other stack sets were able to send to that central event bus. And because we deploy it to our organization, anytime we create a new account, those are automatically going to get those stack sets. We attach that to the root of our organization. Well, that's it. I hope you got a couple of new things out of it. Oh yeah, and the last thing is we hosted everything ourselves in our own S3 buckets. Can you tell my daughter got me sick this week and my brain's a little addled? Anyway, hope you enjoyed this one, and we'll talk to you soon.